Hello, this is a video presentation supporting the conclusion of my Fine Art MA. I've made this in expansion from a slideshow I used in my assessment to document the overall process for my own professional records, but I will state in advance I'm making this as brief and succinct as possible. I also have published my final essay online via my website, along with my previous essay from earlier in the course, which will go into greater depth about a great many ideas and things. And I would absolutely love to go into more depth about my past and present ideas, but free time has not been on my side since the assessment a few weeks back, and as I record this, I'm hoping to close this chapter really as quickly as I can so I can use every minute I can to crack on with where I want to take everything next. This presentation should complement the essay, especially with the inclusion of the video-based stuff that's relevant. There may be elements from my final project material not featured here that may come up later down the line, as I will be continuing a common thread. This project was very much a trimmed down and compromised version of what it could potentially be given more time and resources, but then that's fairly typical, and I was very satisfied with the outcome nonetheless and my final grade. It is, however, scratching the surface of ideas that could materialise in the future. Currently, I'm reading this off a document I typed up yesterday, and I haven't had much of a chance to rehearse. I did a few rehearsals earlier in the week and realised I had to just type it up, and so yes, I'll just try and plough through this as quickly as possible. So let's dive in. The title I chose was Components. First, I'll read the blurb I featured in my promotional zine for the project. I should warn you, it was written in a manner to appeal to a certain mindset and might alienate a few people, but it might at least set the tone a little better to get minds ticking away. Also, there's a typo in it I only noticed the other day in preparing this video. There's sort of all I can do about that now, but anyway, here we go. Components is an installation piece that navigates via binary aesthetic templates and approximations, unpacking an otherwise, that's meant to say, intuitive creative method by composing a piece with the common contrasting elements evident, depicting content that can seem infinite beyond its present containment and application, with specific elements of visual texture, frequency, direction, and abstract iterations of phonetic sounds. This piece is reflective of a constant internal negotiation of incoming information, navigated within frequently revised polarities. The use of the auditory alignments is formulated to enhance subjective participation within the imagery, to feel like a familiar experience inferred from its abstract content. Now, other than the typo, that does more or less sum it up, I think. But here we go. So, some notable art references I kept close to my project development. Let's play this one here. Oh, hang on, let's go back. Yeah, so I kept Oscar Fischinger, whose work, here we go, I can play this now. Oscar Fischinger, whose work for Fantasia I've got here, he was an abstract animator who did, for a brief period, work for Disney's Fantasia, but I believe they let him go before too long for being a little more abstract than they were after. Still, I have been interested in the prospects of abstract animation since college days, and making a couple of flipbooks then, and dipping in and out of it here and there ever since. And Fischinger's work is something that pops up a lot, for good reason, in that area. Some of you may recognise it from the film. Okay, and here on the right, let's play this. Norman McLaren, who I discovered more recently, fitting very much with the notion of elements, marriage of sounds with visual art, and developing these textured rhythmical processes that touch up on a lot of common areas in my artwork. All of this kind of thing goes in much more depth in the essays uploaded, particularly analysing the nature of the sort of drawing work I've been doing for a few years. I won't go into it that much here because of the additional information available, and I'd assume some familiarity with my visual style already when watching this. It's all been plastered online for years, so it's there for those who seek it. So, pause that. Turn the sound off that for a second. Though I won't repeat myself from the essay in talking about this bottom piece, I will say, and let's play it here, I absolutely loved it when I saw it in London last year. Though some people actually found it overwhelming and nauseating. I couldn't get enough of it. My attention span, even with things I like, is very limited. The concept and aesthetic of it is both very much on my radar, at least from talking about that. I think this was at the start. Just having a sip of drink. Here are a few more bits from my Interim Project, which was part of an exhibit across venues in Folkestone. The hand in the top left was done around the same period, but wasn't directly related, only in that it highlights the common use of hands and sometimes other anatomical elements in my work. As with using photos and text in the past as well, a lot of my work over the past few years has had a notable element of something recognisable in them. As a visual signifier, anyone can identify. As a device for the observer, as much as for me to explore all the visual abstract content that doesn't explicitly represent one thing or another. It was breaking down non-explicit representation of this visual code that would become more and more central to creating a final project that fit into a clear context. The context being one involving basic binary elements, depicting in open and ambiguous ways, but with constant parallels observed with examples of binary elemental structure in nature and perception, particularly thoughts of my experience of perception in the context of processing linear, specific information, for example, the effects of dyslexia and dyspraxia that they have on my reading comprehension. That, of course, I have more to say on in the essay. But in terms of these interim origins here, it was the last time I attempted to integrate these universal signifiers, like the hands in my work. I wanted to integrate these things for a few years, and will no doubt do so more so in the future, but that I have learnt fits better as a playful, intuitive exploration, which I've mostly been more accustomed to, and those are hard to contain in the context of an MA unless I can draw from something much simpler and reliable, like the ongoing curiosity of navigating information, sensory information, through a lens, or perhaps inevitably of discrete binary component structures. The flowing forms seen pouring down into the hands for this work was originally planned as a projection onto a still image, basically. Where are we here? Yeah, onto an otherwise still fixed image. This was too ambitious and impractical to realise at the time. In fact, the whole project development was fraught with unceasing physical pain from very invasive orthodontic treatment I was having at the time. Although that treatment is thankfully a lot more manageable now. The first 4 months which was around the time of this project, had a significant impact on my energy levels and ultimately my overall mood, which bled into this project. While I was already thinking about comprehensions of external information, my accelerated tiredness and low mood gave an extra tone of self-defeat, I think. The words "nothing works" included to be disguised amongst the abstract content, the same way I've hidden text before, although rather than being humorous or subversive as typically before, it was just echoing a deep sense of relentless defeat and futility. At its heart, I'm normally a lot more optimistic in temperament, but this project for me marks a good collection of ideas that were compromised in quality and context by unavoidable obstacles. Quite a bit of time passed before I could muster the positivity and motivation to do any more artwork, actually. But when I finally did, and thanks in great part to a couple of reinvigorating tutorials and of course lessening physical pain, I picked up the potential of depicting those flowing liquid-like elements that you see pouring into the hands, based in large form as an extern. Based in large form and experiment. I'm not sure what that says there. I'll have to skip that bit. Experiment, yeah, typo there as well. Based from an experiment I made half a year prior, which I talk about in my essay, and there's images of those in there. Okay. This idea offered a different, more promising approach to bring my still imagery to life and create the kind of continuous movement I had in mind for years to pull off in an installation, like a living canvas. And that also refers to various things that you can find online of my work. Okay, so around the same time of the interim had around the same time it had passed, I also started thinking about depicting internal dialogue in a video piece, either in obvious or ambiguous ways to evoke a sense of free-flowing thought, perhaps navigating its way endlessly against a continuous backdrop. So I had the idea of animating abstract gestures to the list of sounds in the phonetic alphabet. This process took a long and often tedious amount of time, from original drawings on my iPad to sticking it all together and formatting it into a usable order. I dipped in and out of this process. At points it seemed unlikely I'd be able to complete anything along the lines of what I eventually did. But the idea was solid. I had to make cunning shortcuts towards the end, but even so it tested me to the core of what I was doing. This is an area I intended to expand upon. Even in the early stages, I had researched potential methods to project these short animated bursts to respond to speech in real time via a mic. This is still a concept in motion. For my final piece, I settled for a demo of sorts that I'll explain a little later. But in a nutshell, this phonetic alphabet has, for me, potential to expand not only visually, but the basic setup of creating elements that can be triggered by sound in real time, or indeed other forms of sensors, motion sensors perhaps, so that a moving multimedia installation could react to those around it in real time, the same kind of participation and immersive potential familiar with the process and approaches of music visuals, which is an area I've also been keeping an eye on for quite a while. Okay, once again, lots more info on my essay, but here's some stills of the workflow. Not everything went to plan. There was a lot of practical learning curves and some serendipity in the whole process, but here's some example of how I drew large elements that could meet top to bottom, so to speak, or in some way continue going. Then it was scanned, the drawings were scanned into Photoshop, polished up a bit, and stitched copies of the same image together, apart from the merged wheel piece you see on the right, as its movement was programmed in on Premiere. The wheel was made as a joining piece that could connect the two essential components, and yeah, more on the wheel shortly. So here was the first completed flowing element. Let's get that playing here. This is only a very brief play of it, but as you might have seen elsewhere, like on Instagram, it basically goes on forever. So here's the first completed flowing element. Made it so it could just go on forever and serve as an installation piece in its own right. The various obstacles and serendipities involved in getting everything as seamlessly continuous looking as possible, I talk about in the final essay quite a bit, but just to say it added some aspect of hypnotic quality to them. And it, along with every other step from there up until all the final deadlines, were longer and more complicated than I anticipated. Although it enabled me to produce a bit faster as a result. Now, were I to take the similar workflow again. That's the second piece. I'll take another drink whilst it plays, actually. Okay. A little bit on publicity. I designed a print including a QR code so I could display my recent video-based work at fairs and events like the one photographed here. That particular fair, Urban Art Fair in Brixton, was a really good day. I hadn't been able to do as many art fairs as usual while on the MA, but very glad I did this one. Okay. So this slide shows the wheel link drawing I made to create this continuous joining piece that could be a fusion of the basic visual components I wanted to play with and evoke. This time lapse here, no, this one, let's pause that. On the left, I shot to observe how I typically draw these works, often with condensed bursts of energy and lots of pacing up and down in between. Plotting a basic skeleton to begin with, a vague idea of the outcome in my mind's eye, then moving between thick and thin pens, erratically alternating positions and rotation. You might also spot I concealed in my here we go. You might also spot I concealed in my fleeting subversive inclination the words "fine artists take forever to say nothing." This is not a dig at anyone in particular, and I confess to being one of them every now and then. But when push comes to shove, I like clear, simple, and brief information. Again, drawing back to what I said about processing information, I have all too often found, especially when reading project briefs on courses other than my own, because I'm a student support assistant at an art institute. I work with students on other courses. So yeah, project briefs there and art theory that had to sort of try and read. There's more esoteric and deliberately vague or cryptic language to illustrate something with what I found all too often little substance, if any. I think if an idea is important or relevant in any way, you should at least be able to attempt to summarize it in a simple way, as if you were laying things out like a scientist, clearly stating the purpose and intentions, indeed values of this whole endeavour, I think. But I realise that a lot of people dig the art industry just so that they can stretch their analytically vague muscles in response to whatever happens to be in front of them. I wrote this text to either way around, so it presents, so it is present, rather. Sorry, this is my poor reading comprehension in action here. It's too long a paragraph. Around, but discreetly submerged in all the vague and ambiguous abstractions, as most points of worthwhile, sorry if this doesn't make entire sense, but it will eventually again. As most points of worthwhile substance often are submerged in countless streams of self-indulgent wank. It's kind of ironic, really, with what I'm doing. Could be a metaphor, maybe. But the point is, if any, that if I'm going to make anything ambiguous in meaning, I want it to be enjoyable. I think if you can't at least try and be inviting or persuasive in expressing your ideas, however well formed they may already be, then you're doing yourself an immense disservice. But that's just me on my soapbox. It comes up a lot in this whole process, and I could easily start talking about why I think it's a problem in social media, amongst other outlets. But that's a rant for another time. Let's play this. Oh no, go back. Play this one quickly. Okay. This is obviously the full wheel section, and you can see the text. You might be able to spot the text fine artists say nothing. It's written backwards and forwards, so you could kind of identify it if you're looking either way. That's kind of what I was trying to talk about in the previous paragraph. It just got a bit too long, and I lost track a little. Okay. So here are some more stills from the workflows. Lots of different projects, all exported at the highest resolution and frame rates I could to present as much intricacy as possible and to have larger installations in mind. I had intended to use a projection on a larger space for this project, but neither the space nor an adequate enough projector was available. The high quality of each exported video to collage into new projects did demand a fair bit of time, patience and processing power for me, as well as the computer. And I do have sections of the finished video backdrop in 4K, which does work very well with all the intricate little textured details of the hand-drawn lines and the swirls. But I only have my iMac at present to view that. It did at least ensure optimum export quality into 1080p HD resolution at the end, which I think is the bare minimum for this project to look that good, especially on a screen with strong enough contrast as the one I used for the show. Anyways, lots of automations of positioning, size, speed, and direction going throughout these processes. The final layout I chose was a plan B, really, as all those manually programmed variations I mentioned meant the segments didn't fit together quite as seamlessly as Lego pieces I was originally expecting. Okay. And so you see here, am I at the right place? Here we go. Yes. And so you see here, the abandoned project on the right here illustrates the issue I was just saying. And I put a couple of other abandoned exports here to give a taster of the trial and errors involved. So let's play. This was just a piece that wasn't used closer towards the end. Not too dissimilar from what I ended up using. As you can see, every time the two bits kind of get combined, there's things to automate to get it to link up, and then that all needs to be exported as high quality as possible so it can be blended together in new editing projects and so on and so forth. So yes, this wheel piece here gives an idea of what I was attempting to do originally, and as you can see here, it wouldn't link up. There's no way that would have worked if I stuck to more clearer parameters from the beginning part of the process with drawing and measurements, because I did actually have to end up using quite a bit of maths and anyway, had I applied that from the very beginning stages, and then yeah, we could have had a whole sort of wheel perfectly going around and round, and then I could have played with rotating that and doing all sorts of things. So yes, that was an earlier idea. Oh yeah, and that was just a version of the wheel turning that was slightly different in terms of automation, subtle kind of adjustments in its positioning that yeah, don't really have time to go into, but might get the gist from that. So quick look at methods I've had, almost there by the way, quick look at methods I've had in my peripherals during the project and intend to familiarise myself with a lot more now. I won't go through it too much as they all offer different potential applications, but it should give some idea, particularly with what I was saying regarding real-time real-time interactive elements like my phonetic alphabet folder, which you can see demonstrated in the center of this slide. And as I said before, really scratching the surface here. So yes, we have on the right Isadora, which may, amongst other potential bits of software, allow me to program, automate things to respond. And there's Adobe Animate and After Effects, which on my list of things to do very soon. Quick video demonstration here of the zine. There was a few other bits I had to present for assessment, but this fairly pleased with the design for this. I might have given the cover a bit more thought, but as you see, the idea is playing around with components in the theme of its design. Two different fronts. The text is repeated in both corners each way round. Yeah, you get the idea. This is just a screenshot of me making the soundtrack. I mean, yeah, again, I probably cover it enough in the essay, but you got various pink noise, binaural beats effects. Well, don't really have time to talk about binaural beats that much here, but has all sorts of relevance in what I'm doing, really. Particularly in using headphones for the final piece, and yeah, I won't go into that anymore right now. There's a quick look at the final piece. There's not much more to say here. I have uploaded a more substantial kind of sample of this online now. first you can see there the phonetic burst that I was talking about, which oh yes, I have another bit of text here I'll read regarding that. So the phonetic animated bursts you see were added towards the final stages with basic pulse sounds against a soundscape of pink noise and binaural beats. More of that explained in my essay. Sound will become a greater element in my work again, moving back into music territory as much as I can find the time to do so. As for the phonetic bursts, they were mostly selected as random for aesthetic demonstration against the time that I had. But there is one flow you will notice in the final work that does, in fact, say fine artists take forever to say nothing, as a throwback to before. The internal dialogue or internal rationalisation of thought, in this case concluded in a well-natured way, the common struggle to extract worthwhile content from a sea of elaborately faffing around with information. Make of it what you will. I certainly don't wish to hold anything concrete to it right now. I want this work to encourage people individually with its basic modes of structure, as with a lot of my work. I want it to reflect my pursuit of stimulation as much as obstacles, making sense of an infinite flow of content outside and within. But how that transmutates into other people's observations of it starts from a basic quality, I think, of being aesthetically stimulating, with the attention-grabbing qualities of graphic design, but the artfully ambiguous outcomes of more basic, hopefully universal patterns of thought. Put simply, I hope, I'd rather be refined at being persuasive or ambiguous than attempt to make some explicit statement. If there is a statement, it's simpler and deeply embedded in the human experience, more so than will ever be adequately described. So please just enjoy it, if you enjoy it, and let your mind wander with it as much as I do. That about ends that. Thank you very much for watching.